to Women in Literature 2021. This is a festival celebrating the written word by females. It has been organized by Sabine Muzaffar, who is the founder of Ananke. I'm delighted to have with me here today Sabdezar Irfan, author of the graphic novel Grey Matter. Sabdezar is a visual communication designer with an equal love for illustration and literature. Based in Lahore, she's currently working as a freelance illustrator alongside working a corporate job, hoping to fulfill her dream of telling the infinite stories inside her in the finite space of life. Sabdezar, thank you so very much for joining us today, and many congratulations. Sabdezar, I'm going to dive straight in. Now, yours is a graphic novel, and I dare say it's Pakistan's first graphic novel that's exploring the concept of marriage in a South Asian context. It's looking at issues such as mental illness, emotional well-being, and of course, it toys with a lot of issues relating to life and death, or rather life or death. So, number one, your main character is a female named Farah. I have to ask, who is she? Is she based on you, or is she based on someone that you know? Who is Farah?
So from the very beginning, this graphic novel came about as part of my thesis project for my undergrad. And from the beginning, I knew that whatever I do, whether it's a graphic novel I make or a film or anything, my protagonist will always be me. So, in a matter of speaking, I can say that this graphic novel was
Sorry,
just
Sakshi, could
me
you speak a
writing.
little louder? I think there's a slight delay. A little louder, please, if it's possible. Okay, so who
Yeah,
is Farah?
Sarah is essentially the reflection of me for
Okay,
myself. Um,
reflection
in
of you.
saying that, I will acknowledge that a lot of references for her character have come from things I've observed in my family, in women around me, in women I've read about. But essentially, um, her core is me and always will.
Okay, okay. So, do you feel that Farah, because the story is so, it has a universal appeal. I feel that women or even men who will come across it, they'll be able to see themselves. Do you feel that Farah has that aspect about her where she's a reflection of almost every woman, at least every Pakistani woman out there?
I feel like that is true because I knew from the beginning that regardless of whether my protagonist is a woman or a cat or a man or whatever, um, I was really studying a personality type before I was building this character. You know, I was studying a self as opposed to another and the codependent relationship between these. So Farah will always reflect and be, relatable to anybody who has felt themselves so strongly rely on other people or places or situations where they feel like they end up losing part of themselves and their individuality to it.
Okay, got it, got it. Now, Sabdasa, what I wanted to ask you was that many women and men have written stories around South Asian marriages and the breakdown in the form of the written word. But you decided to go through a different route altogether. You decided to take the, it's an ancient narrative now, isn't it? A South Asian marriage, a Desi marriage breaking down, and then what happens to the family, how it breaks, right? It's been explored in the form of TV serials, film, drama, plays, novels, and there are countless legal issues that are taking place at the moment. But you decided to take this narrative and frame it in the form of a graphic novel. Why did you do that? And because it's never been done before in Pakistan anyway. It's never been done before. So why did you do that?
I feel like there are two very distinct reasons why I chose to do that. The first being I had this story inside of me and it needed to be told. But when I tried to write it, I felt like I wasn't being able to do justice to it without picture. And when I was just drawing it, I felt like I wasn't able to do justice to it without words. And I just knew that somehow the two of them will have to come together. And the second reason was that when I was doing my research for my thesis,
Yeah.
um, just the concept of graphic novellas and graphic novels was very amusing to me. But however many I've read, and I'm not saying I don't claim to have read a lot, but whatever I have read, I felt like there was a lot left to be explored there, in terms of just concepts, just ideas, stories. There are so many stories that just needed to be told that were not being told. And I felt like it at some point it really became my duty to tell this story in this specific way.
Sure, sure, absolutely. I mean, the imagery that you've drawn, and these are illustrations that you've drawn by yourself, right?
Yes.
So the imagery is so powerful, and it starts off with something as simple as a small pimple that Farah wakes up with one day on her forehead, and immediately you're drawn in because, I mean, who hasn't faced that situation? You know, when they wake up and there's just a pimple, but it's so graphic, and it shows how the emotional side of Farah is going out of control by factors caused by her husband, by her children, and how isolated she becomes as she's steeped further and further. So I do feel that the imagery sort of, you know how they say a picture is worth an image is worth 1,000 words. I feel that with your illustrations, the drawings communicate a lot more than the text itself, which is very interesting because you're saying a lot more through your drawings and illustration than you are actually using the language, which is it's simple language, but it's deceptively simple because there's a lot of weight. How long did it take you to come up with a text for it? Was it always in your mind, or did it come along as you were drawing? What came first, the image or the text?
So, in simple words, the text came first. But if you really want to know the story behind it, um, I did a lot of research on the concept of codependence because I knew that was something I wanted to work on.
Yeah,
And then I really just sat myself down and I was like, okay, so you've done this, you've done your research. Now, what do you want to do with this? You
yeah.
know? And I just knew that there is a story that needs to be told, and I really need to pull that out of myself. And I channeled my own, everybody has childhood trauma, I guess. I channeled a lot of that, a lot of what I had seen around me in my family, in women around me, in women I read about, in women I see on TV. And I just knew, okay, there is this story and it needs to somehow come out.
Yeah.
And it took me about a week to pen down the entire script. And then um, I had decided that I'm gonna sketch out the characters, see what I want them to look like, and then start. But once I was done with the story, I just couldn't wait, and then I just started, and I kept going, and it just started to flow, And it took a total of around 7 months, and it was just there. Yeah.
Now, this sort of covers my next question, which is why did you show a marriage breakdown? You know, often people criticize anyone who's doing anything related to media that why is it always anti-Pakistan? People don't want to accept the reality of the situation. I suppose they just want to see Pahar, mountains, and the lakes and the rivers, and that's all very well. I mean, we all love nature, but we have to accept that there is a specific reality of our country as well, especially pertaining to women. And it's quite sad because for a country that is obsessed with weddings and children, unfortunately, there is also a realistic side of it, which is marital breakdown. And we've seen an increase in that. So, was it a conscious decision to show the marriage breaking down and the realistic, or what some people might say, the ugly side of it? You know, the criticism could always be levied that, well, they could have worked things out or something nice could have happened, but you stuck to your guns and you stuck to, look, this is a situation and I want to narrate the reality slash ugly side of it as well and what really happens.
I feel like there is this story, and the way a lot of people see it, this is every other person's story. So I'm just wondering why, if this is every other person's story, why don't you want to hear it? Why don't you want to read about it? Why don't you want to see it?
Yeah.
And see, when we say marital breakdown, I feel like somewhere it's being suggested that I portrayed Farah as the good guy and then her husband is the bad guy. But that's really not what's happening here, because
No.
it was
No.
never my intent to say that her husband was evil for leaving her or for deserting her
There's no
and
good
oh
or bad.
bichari,
That's the
left
thing.
alone. It's not like
There's no.
that. And you see in the way they communicate, or in the way they try and then fail to communicate, you see that they're just two people who are very, very, you know, they're in this thing and they're almost at that point where they are talking at each other, they don't hear each other anymore, and he is tired of being this person who is always trying to make up for her insecurities, and she's just this person who has so many insecurities that she cannot help but latch on to her husband to somehow alleviate all of that. And I personally, I've been there. I've been in the position where I've been so codependent on my friends and my family and just people around me that I have really, really thrown all of my weight on them, knowing that it's not fair, but also knowing that there's nothing else I can do for myself. And that's a story that nobody talks about. Yes, marriages fall
Yeah.
apart. Yes, husbands, they get sick and tired and they leave and wives nag, but why does it happen? And I'm not
That's
saying it
really.
happens like this all the time, but this is a story. This happens. I have seen it happen. And
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
it deserves to be talked about.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. This is every other person's story. So why aren't we talking about it? And I'm not going to give the story away, but there's this one scene which has stayed stuck in my head when Abad just leaves, shuts the door, and that's it. That's it. And you're left thinking, is that how easy it is? And of course, that's when the story begins to, narrate itself through Farah's perspective, and you realize, well, actually, that's not it. Hang on a second. We need to unpack this. Is that why, Sabdezar, you decided to tell the story from Farah's perspective? And that's the only perspective that you do take, what's happening, what has happened, how these layers sort of begin to unravel, whether it's family, whether it's society, whether it's friendships, whether it's the past, whether it's the present, whether it's the children, and the children obviously represent the future. Is that why you decided to focus solely on Farah's perspective?
I think essentially why I chose to be Farah's voice is because, like I was saying, she is me. All of what she feels in some context or the other comes from inside of me. And I felt like if I was really going to be true to this story, I had to tell it the way I had felt it. And I feel like the way I wouldn't want someone else to try and tell my story, I don't want to tell Abad's story. you know I want to talk about what he does, and I also don't want to paint him as the bad guy. So I do talk about the times when he's also not able to walk away from this. So you see him coming back and looking after her. You see that soft side of him as well. But I don't feel like I am or was in the position to really step inside of his body and his mind and tell his story, because
Absolutely.
Farah's story will always be my story, and mine will always be hers. And that's the only one I can truly own.
Absolutely. So, do you feel that gender plays a role in this? That you have a situation and there are two people, there's a man and there's a woman. Do you feel that gender has a lot to do with it? That the male perspective is going to differ from the female perspective, and it's his story versus her story, and he said and she said. Do you feel that that definitely comes into play here?
I feel like as much as I wanted this to not be a girl's story
Yeah,
versus a boy's story, it did turn out to be that way, because unfortunately, or even if it's not unfortunate, that's just the way it is, that's how things are. in the world we live in, this will always be a he said, she said situation. And I really, really wanted this to just be a story about a person, but it's her story. It's every other hers story. And I can't walk away from that. And I don't intend on walking away from that.
No, absolutely, and you shouldn't. You shouldn't. What struck me was that you also sort of um, looked at the relationship between a mother and her children. And I think I can safely say that any woman who has children has faced a situation where she's giving to the children equally to her husband, the children's father, but there's always these moments where a mom will ask her children about something and they will prefer the father over the mom. And you see that happening in this situation as well, where Farah is giving and she can't give any more. And like you said, she's grappling with her own insecurities as well. And Abad is grappling with what's happening. And yet the children, which is so classic, at least in a South Asian context, end up sort of, you see the children sort of shifting towards their father, and you think, why aren't you understanding this? And it's a trauma response more than anything else. Was that also a deliberate aspect? Because of course the woman in me, I mean, being a woman myself, I was screaming, no, no, don't let the kids go, take them back. But I think this is a very brave and realistic move on your part. Was it a conscious thing that you were doing? Or do you feel that it just, you wanted to isolate Farah to explore her narrative further?
I feel like on some level, yes, I really did deliberately mean for this to happen because on some level, again, I have been that child. I have been Lian and Hamza, and I have been in that position where I took sides. And that needed to be talked about. In my opinion, that really needed to be talked about and shown to the world. And then on another level, what you said after that is also really, it holds really true because for Farah to really break down and come into her own, she needed to be at that point where she has nobody to fall back on. So the way we keep shifting from the present to the past, you keep seeing people and situations in which she has been really comfortable and falling back on other people and just being comfortable in their presence. And this time around, she really, really needed to not have anybody but herself. Because isn't that how you really come to see your strength? When you realize that, okay, you know, I have me and that's all, and then that doesn't mean that I'm not going to make it. It just means that I need to have faith that if I'm all I have, then that's enough. And she really needed to see that.
I think all of us at some point have been there, Sabdezar, where we've had to sort of really, be stripped of everything, and then to finally turn around and say, right, enough. I am now going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to be who I want to be. And I think a lot of it has to come from the fact that as females, we're so cocooned and shrouded that we never really get to explore ourselves mentally or emotionally. And it's always at a much later stage in life that South Asian women, Desi women, begin to figure out who they are. And really, I think it was somebody once said that, South Asian women in their 20s are realistically living out their teenage years. And when they're in their 30s, they're living out their 20s and so on. And that's how it goes. And I feel that Farah certainly does ultimately come into her own being. But then here's the thing. If she comes into her own being, Sabdezar, why have you left the ending open? I like a story that just says good, bad, tragedy, comedy, happy ending, sad ending. It's done. And I can put the book away and that's the end of it. But you've left it completely open. And that causes the reader to sort of mull over what happened to Farah and what happens to us. How would we feel if we were in that position? Why did you do that?
Um, I've always also been the kind of person who does not like reading books or watching movies that don't have like a fixed,
resolution at the end. But this story, this is just how it came to me. This is just how it was really, really true and honest. Because क्या आपको लाइफ में क्लोजर मिला है, क्या मुझे मिला है? नहीं, we haven't. There is no A to Z, there is no closure. We make our own closure, you know and that's that's exactly what I was doing. I wanted Farah to find her own closure however she finds it, and I wanted myself to find my own closure through her, and for you to find your own closure through her. So the way I saw the story and the way I you know um created it, or whatever you want to call it, I always saw the end of the story being her really understanding that, okay, I am back to square one. Because the story opens with her and Abad on the terrace looking out over the city, and that's when he asks her to marry him. And you really see her going into this relationship, just may you know that in the future she's going to give her everything. And then here she is back again after having done all of that, giving after having given everything that she possibly could have, and she's alone again. And this is where she truly begins again. And it was actually amusing to me that there were other conclusions that people drew from this scene, because the way I saw it, it was really clear cut. But it was very
Yeah.
interesting to see that there were other ways people perceived it. And I have no objections to that fact. I don't want to say, oh, this is not how it's meant to be, this is what I meant. Because what you take away from it is, Farah is you. When you read this book, Farah is you. And what you see happening for her, it's up to you, it's your decision. And I really want you to have the liberty to decide how this story ends.
Absolutely. I think I've yet to find my closure, so I'm still at a previous stage of Farah's story.
Same.
Um, I don't know how I want Farah's story to end, or how I want my story to end, but I do know that I'm still undergoing the process. But I think that's a pretty powerful ending, because you're basically, after everything that Farah goes through, you're basically taking all of it and literally handing it to Farah and saying, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? This is it. And I think that's such a powerful
And that's a
statement to
crossroads
make.
I feel we're all at so often,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
Every time something big happens, we're at that crossroads where it's up to us. And sometimes we don't think that we are, in that position to make um some sort of a change, but we always are. I feel we always are.
Absolutely. Ultimately, if you want to do something with your life, if you want to define yourself, the power does lie within you. And I think that more and more women need to be made aware of that power. They need to be either helped to realize it, but we need to get them there, or they can realize it themselves and we can assist them with that. Sabdezar, thank you so very much for writing Grey Matter. What are your future plans now? Do you plan on writing
Um,
more?
I do. I absolutely do. I feel like this was really just the way this entire thing happened. When I look back at it, it feels like it wasn't me. It just somebody was guiding this, and it just happened. And in the end, I just snapped into reality, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this has happened." And now I'm in this place where I feel like there was one story inside of me that really needed to be told, and it's out. And
Yeah.
now I can feel like there's a billion more that are just kind of clawing at me, from the inside, and they just want to come out. And now it's sort of become my responsibility to let them out, because I know how. After Grey Matter, I think I know how.
Absolutely. And I think you've got a very bright future ahead of you as a graphic novelist, as a writer, because you've got that skill to not just narrate a story, but to really draw a reader in and for them to sort of put themselves in that story. And that's a rare thing to do. Thank you so much, Sabdazar. It was lovely talking to you. And I wish you the very best of luck. Take care. Khuda Hafiz.
Office.